I know that you probably have questions for Brannon, but so do I. So you're on the hot seat now with Connor Trenier, but I'm not Connor, so it's okay. How many years has it been since you've not been working on Star Trek? Let's think back. Enterprise ended in...
Well, let's see. The last season of Orville I did was...
Different show.
But Star Trek, traditional Star Trek, I wrapped up in 2005.
With Enterprise.
Yeah. So it's been 20 years.
Wow.
And then I think I started work on the Orville in 2015, about 10 years.
And there are many Orville
about
fans
10
out
years
here.
later. And I really...
Make more of it!
I'm really hoping we do. I did, after 10 years, I wasn't sure if I could write those kinds of stories again. But boy, did I miss that, telling stories on a starship.
Yeah.
I really, really missed it and really was glad to be doing it again.
Well, we all kind of grew up on Star Trek in the writing department. And when Brannon first came to Star Trek, you were a writer's motion picture. What was
Academy of TV Arts and
There you go.
Sciences, they put on the Emmys every year. Intern.
Intern.
Yes.
Yes.
And I came in, the week of my internship, the week that it began, an 8-week internship, Best of Both Worlds Part 1 had just aired. A cliffhanger, which was such a radical thing at the time, they had to say to be continued at the end, lest you be confused. Like, what the hell? It just ends? And then the day after I saw that, I met Michael Piller, and he was at his keyboard writing part 2, and his first words to me were, any ideas on how to beat the Borg? And that began my journey, and then I never left. I just kind of stuck around for the next 15 years.
Yeah.
15-year internship, I guess.
Well, I think you and Ron, even though Ron didn't come in on an internship, you both were there week to week wondering, am I going to have a job next week?
Well,
Have a job next week?
When I came up there, it was Michael Piller and Ron Moore. That was it. So it was Michael, the showrunner, Ron, and during my internship, Jeri Taylor came in, Joe Manoski.
Yeah.
The core writing staff, there weren't many of us. It's like 5 of us. Kind of all came in during that 8 weeks, and those were the people who stayed.
That was the core of Next Generation. Yeah, once Jeri Taylor and Michael Piller came and the rest of you were there, it really came together. So I know earlier I got very teary-eyed about Jeri Taylor when we were showing the documentary. Jeri was such a mother and such a mentor to us. Can you talk about Jeri for a little bit, please?
Well, yeah, I mean, Jeri was a brilliant writer, really a powerful, she didn't have a science fiction background, but she had a strong character background, and that's what Michael wanted. And whereas Michael Piller was technically my mentor, and I learned a great deal from him, and he's the one who hired me. It took some convincing to keep me there. Piller wasn't quite, even though my first script was an episode called Reunion, and it was where Worf's fiance, girlfriend, baby mama, there you go, thank you, is murdered. That was a rewrite I did with Ron Moore, and even though that turned out really well, he still wasn't sure of his worthy of being on staff, and it was really Jeri that convinced him, and it was Jeri who talked me off the ledge one particular time when I had written a couple of good scripts, and then I wrote a script that didn't work, and because I was on a week-to-week contract, which was a terrible way to work, by the way. She was the one who really said to me, you're in no peril. Stop worrying about being fired and focus on the. She just was a nurturing person and a really great lady, and I'm very grateful to have known her.
And she created Captain Janeway, so.
Yes, she did.
There we go. So.
Jeri was really the person who put her together, yeah.
So I want to ask, because I was there for most of your journey, I was not there through Enterprise, but what were the differences between working on Next Gen and then Voyager and then Enterprise? I mean, I know your job got bigger, you were a showrunner, you were in charge of more things, but how did it change and what was your journey through all of that? It must have been difficult to go from an intern and then all of a sudden you're creating this show called Enterprise.
Well, I never aspired to be a showrunner. It never even occurred to me to do that. And I think that it was in season 2, maybe toward the end of season 2, or beginning of season 3 of Voyager, where Michael and Jeri told me that I was going to be taking the show over. Unsolicited, I did not want the job.
You really didn't.
And thank you. It just seemed like a lot, but I was very honored, and spent season 3 really taking on more responsibility, as Jeri was doing a little less, and so by the time, I'm mistaken, season 4, it was the end of season 3.
Yeah.
So that by the time season 5 came, I was in complete charge of the show, and look, the biggest, and by then Voyager, I think, had found its sea legs. So I was very lucky to be taking over the show at that time. And fortunately, we had 7 of 9 aboard, which helped too. The hardest transition was really from Next Gen to Voyager, because Next Gen was taken off the air at the peak of its popularity. That show could have gone on for 10 seasons. I mean, its ratings were huge. It was an interesting experiment to take that show off at its peak and move it into movies. And
but you also got to write the first movie. So.
Ron and I wrote the first Generations, and thank God we had a chance to write First Contact and redeem ourselves.
Yes.
What was weird was, like, for me, Voyager, the great thing about Voyager was that it wasn't going to take place in the Alpha Quadrant. You couldn't rely on the usual suspects, Klingons and whatnot. It was going to be all new aliens and situations with a starship all on its own. And the terrible thing about Voyager was that it was all new stuff, and you had to make stuff up from scratch. And for me, I just kept telling the kind of stories that I enjoyed telling on Next Generation. And we got a little bit of criticism for it feeling too similar to Next Generation, but at the same time, I remember thinking, well, what's wrong with being similar to Next Generation? I mean, that was a great show. But once we got familiar with the characters, and it became a lot easier.
Well, obviously Voyager's a huge hit because we are now in 30th anniversary and a big, huge documentary.
Yeah.
So, and thank you again for all of you who donated to the documentary. But, so then you went on to create Enterprise with Rick Berman.
Yes.
I would like to hear about that because I wasn't there.
Well, Voyager was coming to an end. Deep Space Nine had gone off, and Rick was pretty adamant that we wait a couple of years before another Star Trek show come on. That the show needed a break, and I totally agreed. The studio did not agree. They were going to make the show with or without us. So Rick had this idea of doing a prequel. Prequels were pretty much, I think Phantom Menace had come out, the Star Wars prequel, and it's kind of a novel idea of doing one, and it seemed like a good idea. I've said this before, but our original conception was to set season 1 on Earth during the construction of Enterprise, and it was going to be a very different feeling. That season 1 was going to end with the launch of the ship, and we had a different show in mind. The studio, I'm not going to say who's right or wrong here, but the studio didn't want to do a prequel. They wanted to just be back in the 24th century. And we had to fight just to get it to be a prequel. And I had this idea for a different TV show about a temporal Cold War, kind of a time travel spy show that I ended up grafting onto Enterprise to appease the studio, really. I thought it was a cool idea. It seemed like a cool idea at first. But like most time travel, became just a nightmare to deal with. And so that's why that was in there. That was in there to say, okay, we're doing a prequel and a sequel in a funny way. And again, a lot of the same, by the time we got to Enterprise, we were trying to tell stories a little differently, but it got a lot of crap because the franchise had just been on for so long at that point. I hope people look back. We're very proud of the show, and we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish, but...
Yes. Enterprise was a good show, and the fans loved it.
But, I look, I look at Alex Kurtzman, who's running the franchise now, and I'm like, man, I've been there. When you're putting on Star Trek that you think is good, and some people love and some people hate. Even Marvel is starting to maybe get a little taste of franchise fatigue. It's inevitable, but I think I'm very proud of the 15 years I spent as most of my adult life on Star Trek. And it blows me away that I'm sitting here still talking about Voyager 30 years later. It's really mind-blowing. And I'm very grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. So of the 3 shows, Next Gen, Voyager, and Enterprise, overall, I know it's hard because that's many years of your life. What was the best experience? Not specifically, but of those 3 shows, which was the most gratifying or heartfelt or...
Well, they all had their high points and low points. I think for me, overall, I had most fun on Voyager. And the reason is, it was my first time running a show, and I really was able to let loose and had kind of an idea of making it more cinematic and doing these little movies, little 2-part movies. It was just a lot, it was really fun. And Janeway was, with all due respect to Captain Picard and Archer, was a lot more fun to write for, just as a character.
Yeah.
Because Picard, he was, stoic and brilliant and articulate. By the way, on a typical day, I don't feel like any of those things. So writing Picard scenes was hard. Janeway is just more of a risk taker. She's snarky when she wants to be, and she was just. You can see it, I hope.
Yeah. So some of you have had the chance to see the documentary, and for those of you who haven't, we're very lucky because we were able to get footage of Geneviève Bujold during her first day on the set. And you're in there being interviewed. The difference of what she brought in those first 2 days, and then Kate Mulgrew walking out 7 days later onto that bridge with all the cast members there. What a difference, right?
Yeah, I was a big advocate for Geneviève Bujold because I was a huge fan of her movies. And I thought, wow, we have a movie star playing the captain. This is going to be great. And Rick was the one, I don't remember what Jeri and Michael said, but Rick Berman was the one saying, she's not used to doing television. This is not going to end well. And if you've seen the dailies, and they're on one of the DVDs or something, she looks terrified. Like, where the hell am I? It would be like waking up on this ship, this cruise ship, having no idea why you're here or who all these people are. her decision to play. She wanted to play the character very like quiet authority, to the point where the sound guy was like, I can't hear what she's saying, and I'm not getting any recording. And I think it was 2 or 3 days of shooting, and it was very much a mutual decision that she would be recast.
And then in walked Kate Mulgrew.
Yeah, there were a couple of screen tests. It was, but Kate was always, she saved us. You know, she really did.
She definitely became Captain Janeway. We all agree on that.
I mean, it's really hard. Watch looking back at those Genevieve dailies, they're weird because you can't imagine anyone but Kate playing Janeway.
Absolutely. I know. Even today, again, when I watched that documentary and watched her, it's like, that could never have worked. So different. I mean, it was a godsend the way it turned out. So you left Enterprise, and then what happened? Orville right after that?
No, I did some other shows. I did a show called 24 right after that. Which was kind of a thriller, which I loved. It was a refreshing difference, and was a blast. I created a couple of shows that didn't succeed. One called Flash Forward, which was a science fiction, which should have stayed on, in my opinion. And I dipped my toe into actual science, in that I started writing and directing a show called Cosmos, which was a sequel to the 1980 original Carl Sagan. This one had Neil deGrasse Tyson as the host. I did 2 seasons of that, and I did a show I loved, a horror show called Salem, which I really loved doing. And then around that time, Seth MacFarlane called and said, hey, I wrote a pilot that takes place on a ship that you might like. And so Seth is, if anyone knows anything about Seth, he's a hardcore Star Trek fan.
Yay.
In like the realist way, and I think given the opportunity, he probably would like to actually be doing Star Trek. But Orville was kind of the next best thing, and it turned out, if you haven't seen the Orville, check it out, because it's different. It's not Star Trek, but it has the spirit. And when we did it, to me, one of the core things that makes Star Trek so enduring is its vision of a future that is optimistic, where everybody has a place, no matter who you are or what your abilities or disabilities. It's just a place you want to be, and that was missing from TV. So much science fiction is really dystopian, and so that's it. So it was nice to do.
Is that, forgive me because I don't know, is Orville still in production?
No, we made 3 seasons, and it's really up to Seth whether we do a season 4. It's not off the table, I will say that.
Would you like to see a season 4?
Well, I'll convey your enthusiasm to Seth. But it's definitely something we talk about. I mean, I can't speak for Seth and the other people, the actors and so forth, but I would love to do another season.
And now, what about Bill Nye? You're working with Bill Nye?
Oh yeah, I did a show called The End Is Nigh, which is a disaster, kind of how do I describe it? A science disaster show about the first half hour is about the end of the world, and the second is how science can save us, and it's hosted by Bill Nye. It's a lot of fun. That's on a streamer called Peacock, if you've heard of that. Yeah.
There's a lot of those streamers out there anymore. It's hard to keep track of everything. So, well, that's Brannon's career in a nutshell, except for, are you developing anything new right now? Anything?
Oh, yeah. I'm doing something really cool. I can't talk about it yet, but it's another. I wish I could, but it's going to be another science-based show with, like Cosmos or Nye, but adventure, scope, cinema, but a science show.
All science. Yeah. I have a question for you. Would you ever want to do something like Law and Order or the Chicago PD? Is that just not of interest to you? It's all sci-fi-ish that you like?
I have no interest. I mean, I like the shows, and I think I've seen every episode of Dateline, but I don't want to write about murder.
Yeah.
I mean, I think 24 is as close, as close as I got to something like that. But no, it's not my cup of tea.
Yeah. Well, it's awfully real. This stuff is close to home.
Yeah. Procedurals they're scary. And every time we tried to do anything even vaguely resembling a procedural on Star Trek, it was just a disaster.
Well, I have one more question for you before we open it up. What is it like to do 26 episodes like we did back in the day, to do 8, maybe 10 episodes now on these new series?
Like on Orville, we did 13. First 2 seasons, we did 13.
So that's half, yeah.
It takes the same amount of time to make somehow. The 26 episodes. Look, it was right out of the gate a sprint. We shot the shows in 7 days. I think we had 5 or 6 where we had 8 days. But then we were told you need to do a 6-day to cover those. And so we always had to do one episode what we called the bottle shows, where it was very small in scale. 26 hours of Star Trek is a lot of Star Trek, man. And it's a lot of pressure. It was a blast. I'm glad I did it when I was younger.
Yeah.
But, the alchemy that makes Star Trek special, the high concept combined with some kind of really meaningful piece of character development, and some underlying thematic content that it hopefully isn't too obvious. It was rare to hit all 3 things. When we did, it would be, maybe go on to be considered a classic episode. We certainly didn't know which episodes were going to go on to become enduring episodes. There were some I thought that weren't, and some that I had that I thought this is going to backfire, that went on to become really popular. But we were flying by the seat of our pants a lot of the times, just trying to keep up with production. But it worked out.
Yeah, you mentioned the other day though, like with Orville, you have the scripts written already before you start shooting. Yeah. That's a huge difference than Star Trek.
Yeah, well, that's because Seth is playing the captain, and also when you have all the scripts written, and you can enjoy production. The way we were making Star Trek, you just didn't have that luxury. But then again, Orville was off the air like 2 years between seasons. Like, that's the other thing. I remember after Best of Both Worlds Part 1, the poor audience had to wait 2 whole months.
Now it's 2
to
years.
find out whether Patrick Stewart was coming back to the show. I mean, we didn't have much time between seasons.
Yeah, that's for sure. So I'm sure some of you have questions. So if you'd like to come up front, please, there's a microphone right there. Just help yourselves.
The whole line.
All lined up. See? Oh, they're already lined up, Brannon. Again, I said, Brannon was so nervous. No one's going to ask questions. Look at there.
So many questions.
So, yes, sir.
Yes. What episode did you write, and you can't believe it made it in production, that you said, I can't believe this episode was actually put on the air?
Oh, that's easy. Cause and effect.
What? That's like a fan favorite.
That's right. And I thought it was the episode that was for sure going to get me fired. Because, remember at that time, the stories weren't told there weren't those kinds of stories in TV and movies. Here was a script that was repeating the same, at first glance, the same act over and over again, to the point where this is well known. Jonathan Frakes, who directed it, thought I was playing a practical joke. And it was so radical that we just weren't sure. Thank God Jonathan did a great job directing it. He deserves a lot of the credit because he just found a way to do things slightly differently each time that propelled the story in just the right way. But man, think about it. That could have just backfired. I mean, and I've told this story many times, but back then people would call TV stations.
I did.
And there were calls coming in that something was wrong with the broadcast, like War of the Worlds or something, And I was pretty convinced. I thought this is really cool, and then I thought, oh God, this is going to be terrible. Who's even going to sit and watch these scenes repeating over and over again? Who's going to have the patience for this? So I thought it was going to be like Spock's brain or something, and then it went on to become a classic episode that is much loved. But at the time, you just don't know that.
Yeah. And did you think that Frasier was going to come in at the end?
We wanted Kirstie Alley. We wanted Saavik. She was not available, so we got Frasier, which is fine.
Yeah.
But it was going to be Kirstie Alley, and then it became Kelsey Grammer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, man.
Thank you.
Yes, next, please.
It's not a little tall. So I'm going to ask a two-part question since we're here to celebrate Voyager. Give Voyager a hand, everyone. Yeah. Good show. I wanted to ask you first, what is the Voyager script you are most proud of? So that's question one.
Oh.
Yeah.
For the second part. Oh,
Second
wow.
one's harder.
There are a lot of them. That's a really hard one to answer. I think I'm influenced by you guys in saying Year of Hell. And the reason for that...
One of my favorites.
But there were these little episodes that kind of flew under the radar, like Living Witness about revisionist history and Distant Origin, which was a Galileo metaphor that I just remember thinking were really great episodes of Star Trek that would have been great on any of the shows, but didn't necessarily ignite the fan base that I'm proud of.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of a spectacular success on every level, Year of Hell was probably a really good one. Great villain, great concept, great character arcs, great Janeway episodes.
Yep. All right, this might be the harder one. So, did you and the production team ever have a debate on whether you were going to get them home after 7 years? And did you ever almost leave them stranded out in the Delta Quadrant?
There was discussion about getting them home early, but
Was it a pissing contest?
no, no, not at all. By the time season 7, I wasn't running season 7. I had taken a step back to start working on Enterprise. So I wasn't involved in those discussions. I was involved in conceiving the finale, Endgame, and there was a pissing contest that took place there that I lost. I lost the pissing contest.
Oh, bummer.
Because, again, forgive me for those who have heard this story, I really felt that 7 of 9 was conceived as a tragic character who, in a very kind of minor episode in season 7 that I did write, one of the few I did that season, called Human Error?
Yep.
Where 7 begins to experiment with love, and there's a chip that is activated when she begins to experience those emotions that almost kills her, and the doctor says, I can't take this out. And in that moment, she realizes she will never be able to love, and that's tragic. Mm-hmm. And I thought in the final episode that what she should have done was for the people who loved her, sacrificed her life to save the crew. And I get a little choked up even talking about it. That's what I wanted to do. I think that I'm glad they didn't, because you wouldn't have gotten, Picard, her on Picard and everything. Though I'm sure they could have figured out a way to resurrect her.
They would have.
They would have.
But your job is to create good drama, so had you gone that route...
But think about what emotional impact that would have had. It would have been amazing. And that, to me, was the trajectory of the character. She could never be human in the best ways, and she could never go back to the Borg. She was just kind of between, worlds. And
Sad.
the least she could do would get this crew home, in some special way. And I was shot down. I argued for it, but I was not. There were 3 writers on that episode, and I was outvoted by the other 2.
Thank you for those questions.
Thank you for all you've done over the years.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for watching.
Yes, next.
Hello. Thank you so much for coming on the ship. I know I speak for probably everyone here that we enjoy hearing from the writers pretty much just as much, if not more sometimes, than the actors, because we hear different stories. So we really do appreciate it.
I just assume that you're here to see the actors, so that's very nice to hear.
No, we love the production. We really do, hearing about it. But so I wrote it down because I always forget these things. So in the documentary, Ron Moore mentioned that he brought many ideas to the table but was shot down. Reading between the lines, my assumption was he likely wanted to make Voyager maybe more serialized and probably more like Battlestar Galactica, and not hit the reset button at the end of every episode with long-term consequences for the characters and the ship. How much of Voyager's episodic nature was due to the writer's room, and how much was that more due to Paramount just wanting to keep it more accessible to the average audience? And then also, what ideas do you wish you had integrated from Ron in the show?
Well,
Great question.
It's a great question. First of all, Ron took all his good ideas to Battlestar Galactica, that motherfucker. And he didn't tell me all of them. So that's... Initially, I wanted Year of Hell to be a seasonal episode. That was going to be... And I knew that wasn't going to happen. But I think Jeri told me, we can talk to Rick, but it's not going to happen. And because these episodes were being made not just to air, but to syndicate and last forever, hopefully. And you should be able to tune into any episode and find your bearings and not need to know what happened in the previous episode. And that's what TV was back then. Again, to be continued. You had to be instructed that the episode, don't worry, it'll pick up later. This isn't the end. Like it just wasn't going to happen. It wasn't really till 24, a major network show, not a daytime soap opera, a major network show went full serialization to great success that the rules started to loosen. And of course, Deep Space Nine was they were very sneaky. They were doing it. And I was very envious. So it was really a studio decision, but you can't really argue with it. Now, Year of Hell turned out to be a 2-parter, and I have been criticized. Oh, 3-parter. I am so sorry. That was you, right? I have to remember moving forward, there was some criticism leveled at the episode that it had a reset button at the end, and which I do take issue with, because it was the only ending. The only way that Janeway could win was to reset time and restore her ship and crew. So in fact, I thought it was it wasn't a cop out. It was the ending. Time's up. Ram the fucking ship. It is really one of Janeway. It's one of my favorite Janeway moments. I always thought she looked good, dirty, and beat up, And she just was so good in that scene, man. She committed, Kate really committed to that whole.
As she does throughout everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Hi, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. I hope you're having a great cruise.
Great time.
I saw at the bottom of the guest list for next year, Ron Moore is coming, possibly. I don't know if you know about that, but
Next year?
Yeah,
That's the hope.
there
Yeah.
wasn't the announcement. It was just really low at the bottom of the list.
Sneaky, isn't it?
Yeah, really. Yeah, so fantastic. Thanks again for being a part of everything that we love. My question was, as far as I know, in TNG, there was acceptance of spec scripts to some degree that was, somehow involved in the creation of the episodes. I'm not entirely sure which ones. Was the same thing ever considered for Voyager, for example?
It was done for DS9 and
Oh,
Voyager.
DS9, yeah.
Yes,
It was done for Voyager?
Yeah, for about the first 2.5 seasons, and then it was just too much. We had received over 30,000 scripts by then.
Wow.
So by the time Voyager was really finding its own, after about season 3, we just couldn't do it anymore. But
Yeah. But, without that process, Ron Moore wouldn't have come along. Renee Echeverria both had submitted spec scripts, and
Right.
it was a good process. But then, there would be ideas that people would claim we stole, and it was becoming a bit of a liability after
Yeah.
a while.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
thank you.
I wanted to ask a two-part question about a specific episode, so I hope you actually remember it. It's it's Emanations, and for anybody, does anybody remember Voyager episode Emanations? Yeah, they run across a planet of beings that when people are starting to die, they put them in this death chamber, and ostensibly beaming them into the afterlife.
And
But-
our reality is their afterlife.
Yeah,
Yes.
but what really happens is it's just their bodies are beamed onto an asteroid belt around the planet, and that's it. And they're covered in webbing, and they decompose, and that's the end of it. So my question, and I really love that episode, and the reason I love it is because of that. It's like it turns out, your bodies just appear on the asteroid belt. There's no real afterlife. But then near the end of the episode, you introduce the concept of there being, they detected a neural energy that happens after they're beamed to this asteroid belt, and the neural energy becomes part of the belt, or something to that effect. Anyway, so that perhaps it wasn't just a wasted life that's simply beamed onto the planet and they're dead and that's it. Perhaps that really is the afterlife, is this so-called neural energy that they detect that happens after die. So my question is, did you come up with that either to appease the possibly religious section of the audience, or did you do it to keep to the tradition of the Star Trek sort of balanced dilemma, like when they arrive at a planet that's about to be destroyed, they want to save them, but now they can't because of the prime directive. So is this neural energy that, or is it to appease?
The neural energy was really just meant to be a little what if.
What if?
It was
Yeah.
not to appease anybody. And in fact, I wrote that episode, and to me, it was an episode about euthanasia. It was really an episode about the pressure, if euthanasia existed, the pressures you might feel to go early. I mean, I don't know if you remember that about the episode.
I do.
And that was just meant to be a little like, what if? Maybe there is some truth to our reality being some kind of afterlife. That's all. That's really all that was.
Yeah,
Giving you something a little extra to think about.
That's actually what I figured. Yeah, I was hoping that. And quickly, the second part, since Ensign Kim was the one that was accidentally beamed into that death machine and used it to get back, when he wanted to get back to work when he got back to the ship, but Janeway forced him to take 2 whole days off. Did he still get paid?
Well, as you know, there's no money in the future.
There you go. Thank you for those questions. Yes.
Oh, thank you very much. Star Trek Voyager is a big part of my life. All of Star Trek's a big part of my life, especially Voyager, because I grew up, I don't know if you remember it, but right next to Larchmont, right next to Paramount.
Yeah, I live near Larchmont.
I used to see all of the characters of Voyager when I was a kid, like 8 years old, before I even knew what any of it was. And that it built into this whole sense of my life when I finally rediscovered Star Trek when I was in my 20s. But as a writer, I'm interested because the primary things that I've been lucky enough to know some writers and showrunners and working in shows, but story, structure, character. If you were to be somebody wanting to write for Star Trek in the new era, what would be a script that you would focus on? Would you write a Star Trek spec? Would you write a sci-fi spec that focuses on character? Would you write
As a writing sample for
as
yourself.
a writing sample if you really wanted to do this?
So I can't speak for every showrunner, but I can speak for myself and even Seth MacFarlane. We like to see something original that came out of your mind. Not like it's hard to write for an existing show, in my opinion, because it's just probably not going to be quite right. It's a tall order for anybody. Write an original piece, and if science fiction is what you're interested in, write a science fiction piece. If if a medical drama is something you're interested in, we're looking to hear your voice. We're looking for something. So that would be my advice. Write a spec pilot, for instance, or a movie.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, next.
Well, kind of building off of that question, I have a question, but it's kind of frivolous. But I did want to say to you, when I was really young, like 10 years old, I got into Star Trek, and it helped me see who I was as a trans person and come out, and it gave me the language that I didn't have elsewhere. And then also, I was always inspired behind the scenes, and I always saw your name come up on the credits, and I learned so much about your career and followed it for so long. And today, I work as a writer and director and just released my first film last year. And I want to just say thank you for inspiring that for me.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And thank you for saying so. That
Seriously,
means a lot.
You were a big inspiration in my life, and both personally and professionally. But anyways, the question is kind of frivolous, but I just want to say that mostly. But there was a show you did right after after Enterprise, excuse me, which was called, ironically enough, Threshold. And it was a show that I really, really loved, the Eldritch Horror show. And you never got to finish it because it got canceled way ahead of its time. And I always loved it. And I was curious, what was your plan for the end of that show? Because it got canceled and I was like, I need to know what the hell was going to happen with that. No one else may remember the show, but I do, and I loved it.
The show was wronged.
It was
well,
great.
First of all, Threshold was an alien invasion show that was kind of handed to me to rewrite the pilot and run the show. And I won't get into everything about it, but it was an alien invasion show starring Carla Gugino and Peter Dinklage in his first TV show, and Brent Spiner. And it was it only lasted 13 episodes. And it was about Carla Gugino played a special analyst who came up with worst case scenarios, and she had this plan that if we were ever contacted by an alien species that was hostile, they would activate Threshold, which is the first phase of the plan and all this stuff. And it was a very high concept show. There were 2 issues, had this great cast, it was pretty well written. 2 issues. There were 2 other alien shows that came out that same season. One called Invasion on like ABC or something, and then I can't remember. One was on NBC.
Was it V? Was that?
No, that was back in the 80s.
No, there was a new one, but yeah, sorry. Yeah.
But there were 2 others, and then the other problem was that our show was on CBS. Not what you think of when you think of science fiction, and they were. I don't know why they made this show, because they really were forcing me to downplay the science fictional elements. And if you watch it, you can kind of see that. It almost feels like a procedural.
Yeah.
And what would have happened was at the end of season 1, the aliens were going to, I'm speaking in very general terms, they were going to start winning. And it was going to activate the next phase of the worst case scenario plan. And so the title of the show was going to change to Foothold.
Yeah. Oh, very cool.
And each season was going to have a different title
Yeah.
as things got worse and worse, and then there would be a resistance eventually, and that was a different, I can't remember all the name of the titles, but we had a whole thing planned. It should not have been on that network.
That the teeth in the vegetables still haunt my nightmares. So thank you so much, and seriously,
Thanks for your comments, really. It means a tremendous amount.
Yeah. Yes.
Hi, Brannon. Thank you again so much for being part of the cruise and for your great work on not only Star Trek, but a lot of other work. My question, I like to ask this to actors as well, because you have so many memories and so much association with the projects that you're working on. Can you go home and watch Star Trek Voyager or Star Trek Enterprise or 24 as an audience member and enjoy it as an audience member without a lot of self-criticism about, man, I really wish I could have written this dialogue better, or et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, that's a
Great question.
Never been asked that. It is a great question. And I do occasionally will run across an episode airing. And sometimes I think, dear God, this is really boring. How did this get made, But then sometimes, because I've forgotten a lot of it, I'll think, wow, that's really cool. There was this one episode I'd done for Voyager called Deadlock, which was kind of sci-fi, techno thriller mystery, and where the Voyager's being destroyed, and there's this transition where you realize you transition to a Voyager that isn't being destroyed, and you see a ghostly Janeway sees herself as a ghostly, and I'm like, wow, that's cool. What a great story twist. I just didn't remember that even happened, and I wrote the episode, So it can kind of go both ways. But generally speaking, it usually goes the way of, dear God, what was I thinking?
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that question.
Yes.
Hey, so the very end of Voyager, having written, well, you mentioned VII already, and your thoughts on the alternate endings maybe of the end of Voyager as to why there was just kind of an abrupt stop. I feel like there could have been another part to like Voyager getting home and showing what the characters, what the characters did at the very end when they got home. Just stopped.
Yeah. Lodge your complaints with those other two writers. It's not Ken Biller and Rick Berman. I didn't write the episode. I co-wrote the story. So I actually can't really speak to it because I can't remember. You're saying it would have been nice to see what became of these characters.
Yes.
Yeah, well, lobby for a Voyager. Let's do another 2-part movie for.
Yeah.
The cast is all still alive, right?
Yeah.
Most of them, yeah.
So far, don't
Okay.
curse it.
Just a joke.
That's true.
No, but sorry, guys. All right.
Hi there. So this is my first cruise, Star Trek cruise. Thank you. So I think it's a real treat to actually be able to ask a question to one of the writers of Star Trek. So my thought is that one of the things that's very appealing about all the Star Trek episodes is that you kind of infuse social commentary in there. It's like everything is kind of, there's something relatable to what's going on in just today, what's going around today. And I was wondering, when you're coming up with the scripts, do you actually come up with a script first and then try to infuse the social commentary? Or do you come up with this, you say, hey, I want to really comment on that, and you devise a script around it?
If only we were that meticulous. The honest answer for me, now every writer's different. It was, occasionally we would say, let's tap, like on Enterprise, there was an episode where we decided we were going to do an HIV kind of AIDS metaphor with, I can't remember the name of the episode, but it was with T'Pol, what's it called? Stigma. Stigma, where mind melds can pass along a certain disease and all this stuff. But that was rare. For me personally, the social commentary would come kind of organically out of the piece. And my episodes tended to be very high concept, but also very shallow. There wasn't a lot of, but it was always best if the social commentary was oblique and wasn't necessarily the main reason for doing it, because then it gets a little too heavy-handed.
Well, I got to tell you, what's amazing is that, you could watch these episodes. I was watching the episodes just in the cabin before we came, and 30 years later, and they're still relevant to what's going on today. So yeah. I think it's amazing.
That's one of the reasons we're here, I think. Honestly, thank you for saying that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, next.
This is the third cruise for my husband and I. Thank you. It's been cool. But when we came on the first one and said, let's go laugh with those crazy Star Trek people. And here we are 3 cruises later. My point is, after the first cruise, we were so rattled because everybody would get up and talk about their favorite episode by name, and they knew lines, for crying out loud. So we thought, we have to go home and watch everything. And when I tell you, we watched every single episode we could get our hands on.
That's like 900 episodes.
Oh, we watched all the shows, all of them, okay? And so we came back here and we thought, okay, we're ready now. No. I still come to things like this and hear people say, talk about this episode, and they know lines and they know, oh my God, it just makes my head hurt. And we love Star Trek and all of its iterations, but I just have to tell you that sometimes it's very hard to deal with people who know episode names and lines. Help us out here, just a little, okay? Just a little bit. Lastly, please define a showrunner. Tell us what exactly that person does.
That's a
because
great
we hear the
question.
term all the time, and I don't have a clue.
Okay. Great question. And
The box stops with him.
my first impulse to say it's someone running for their lives away from that job. But
Yeah, it didn't sound like you were thrilled to get your first job.
well,
showrunner
it's
job.
A showrunner almost always is a writer.
Okay.
In television, in movies, the auteur is the director, and in TV, it's generally speaking, the writer. So
Okay.
a showrunner primary job is writing the scripts, conceiving the stories, running the writing staff, making sure that the scripts are being delivered on time and that they're as good as they can be.
Okay.
The showrunner, in my case, and in a lot of cases, because I'm very hands-on in the filmmaking process, it's also responsible for approving wardrobe, casting the show, editing the show, makeup, kind of doing a lot of things that directors would do other than being on the set actually doing the directing. I don't want to diminish what the directors did, but the main job is writing.
It's a wonder there isn't a high showrunner suicide rate by the sound of it.
Kind of like dentists.
Yeah, well, there
My
is that.
assistant is here. His father's a dentist. No offense. Is there a high suicide rate among showrunners? It's a great question. I don't know. I
hope
certainly
not.
was never tempted to kill myself.
Good.
But
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Yes.
Guys, I want to thank you both for your contributions to Star Trek, because it's because of you guys I'm a major fan. I love seeing all the actors. I love taking pictures with them, getting autographs, talking to them. But Brent Spiner once said that it's like if it's not on the page, it's not on the stage. So in that sense, you are Mr. Star Trek for me, Mr. Brannon Braga. You are responsible for some of the most amazing episodes that I experienced. I love how you mix time travel with alternate realities with great character development. I mean, before and after was a great Beverly. Cause and Effect was a great Beverly episode. Deadlock was a great Janeway episode. With Year of Hell, which is my favorite episode, it's like I ask myself, like whenever I'm in a struggle or I need to find inner strength, I would say, what would Janeway do? Because of that episode. Timeless was a great Harry Kim episode. What is your process to create such incredible episodes? I mean, where do you get the inspiration? Because they have all similar concepts, but it's like they're all individual. And I'm amazed by all these episodes that you've done. So if you could explain the process, that'd be great.
Well, thank you for saying all of that. It really makes all of the nights I contemplated suicide worthwhile. It's, each episode, for me, I don't know, it just, ideas pop into your head. I mean, what is inspiration? You got to learn to trust your subconscious, because if you sit there at a desk saying, okay, I got to come up with an idea. I got to come up with a great idea. It's going to be hard. Having said that, an episode like Timeless, I knew the 100th episode of Voyager was coming up. And of course, we wanted to do something special. And for whatever reason, an image, sometimes it just starts with an image, popped into my head. And that was of Voyager under the ice, like frozen, dead, gone. I'm like, okay, that'd be a cool way to start the 100th episode. Why is it there? What happened? I don't know. But I just knew that was something provocative. And from there, well, I knew we were going to get a great crash sequence. And I picked Harry because Harry was the young member of the crew. He didn't get enough episodes. I think he'd be good for this. And it just kind of evolves from there. So everything's just a little bit different. Cause and effect, I wanted to do, that started as kind of like I wanted to do a Rashomon episode told from different, the same event told from different points of view. And somehow that transmuted into what it became, sometimes the idea starts with something different, but I really don't know where it comes from, Also, don't forget, there were other writers, okay? So with Cause and Effect, I was writing the script and I'm like, how in the hell are they gonna get out of this time loop? Like, we never really figured that out in the writer's room. And because on Star Trek, Groundhog Day, which came out a couple years after that, they didn't have to figure anything out. Like, on Star Trek, you actually have to explain what a temporal causality loop is and how you're gonna get out of it. And I love that about Star Trek. And so I remember we went back into the writer's room and I said, guys, what are we doing here? Like, I can't figure this out. And together we kind of came up, I don't remember how it all went down, but this idea of a message through Data's subconscious, which was 4, 4, 4, 4. And so I wasn't, 3, okay. Man, how embarrassing, My point being, I wasn't writing alone, I had a lot of other writers helping, we helped each other.
Thank you. We only have time for 2 more questions. I'm sorry, but maybe you'll get to ask them tomorrow during the Voyager panel if you don't get to ask them today, okay? So, yes.
I'll make them count. Lolita, thank you for getting me on the ship and for all you do.
Absolutely. Yes.
Mr. Braga, sir, considering the body of your work and all of the minds you've shaped and hearts you've touched, if there were a Mount Rushmore of teleplay writers, you deserve a spot on that. And I will advocate for that forever. A showrunner question: right before you launched your big show enterprise, 9/11 happened. I was always wondering, from your perspective, did those events in any way cause a pivot, or did you have to do anything, or did you, as the sole voice of Star Trek on TV at that time, was there something that you wanted to say that shaped how you started writing and introducing new elements into Enterprise? And my question for you as a writer, not enough time. Just let's go with that one. Thank you.
We were in production on season 1. We weren't that deep into production, and 9/11 I was on my way to work, heard it on the radio, thought it was like a War of the Worlds telecast, didn't think it was real. It was in the back of our minds, you know. I think 24 came out, and from what I hear, 24, they almost didn't air it because they didn't think people were going to accept it. It wasn't until season 3 that we felt maybe we could do something with it, and that we were finally, you know, Jonathan Dolgen, who ran Paramount at that time, called us into his office, I remember, after season 2 and said, when we were doing season 2, you guys need to do something different, and do something big. And we were like, well, what about a serialized season? And they said, okay. So season 3 of Enterprise is a serialized season of Star Trek that has obvious 9/11 shadings to it, and gets into a lot of the stuff that 24 got into in terms of, you know, to what extent do you go to, you know, save people, you know, and so that's kind of how, if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One more quick question, then we have to go, sorry.
Hi, Brannon. Thanks. Good to see you again. When we were talking briefly the other day, and I mentioned about the frustration it must feel for you sometimes as an artist, as a writer, that you, as a screenplay, you only have a certain amount you can work with, and you have to kind of hand it over to so many other people to do and mutate in so many different ways. And how frustrating did that get sometimes to see something maybe turned into something you were not wanting it to be done, or you saw it on screen and you said, that's not what I intended, that's not what I had in mind?
I was usually pleasantly surprised at what ended up on screen, and was usually involved in making sure that it was going to at least approximate what we hoped for. It's funny, what you see on screen, just to address the acting part of it. When I started writing Voyager, we hadn't cast the show. So I didn't know what Janeway sounded like, or any of the characters for that matter. No idea what the holographic Doctor was going to be, much less, and no clue that he would even be a major character on the show. Once the actors are cast, you start hearing their voices, and that's when it really comes alive. So it is a symbiosis that occurs. You know, I hear Kate Mulgrew's voice, and suddenly now I know how to write the character. So it's not just all about taking what's on the page and making it come to life. It works the reverse direction as well. Having said that, we did so many crazy things. We buried the ship under the ice and turned the bridge frozen, and we did all this crazy stuff, but the funniest things really through production. I remember on Next Gen, they couldn't figure out how to turn Counselor Troy into a cake, which was this episode Phantasms, about Data's nightmares. And I'm like, guys, put a hole in the table, stick her head up there, she's underneath. This is old magician's trick. It's the saw lady and half thing. Like, so anyway, thanks for the question.
Thank you. And listen, thanks you guys so much, and thank you, Brannon Braga,
Thanks,
for
guys.
joining us. See you all at the Voyager panel tomorrow.